If any of you guys are searching for a great Instagram follow, check out Damien Trainor on Instagram. He's a multiple-time Muay Thai world champion and one of the great minds of striking in his current generation. He done a great series of videos discussing whether or not you should swing your rear arm whilst throwing the rear leg roundhouse kick. And the videos themselves came from the fact that on a lot of his videos that he posts, because he posts a lot of great heavy bag drills or pad drills that you can work when training Muay Thai on your own. And in a lot of these videos, he'd throw a rear leg roundhouse kick and he'd swing his rear arm down as he threw the kick. Now, if you go down into the comments section where all the keyboard warriors live, you'll find a lot of people saying, you shouldn't be swinging your arm, you're leaving yourself exposed. You're leaving that huge opening on that rear side when you throw that kick and people could potentially counter it. Now, take into account that Damien is a multiple-time world champion, you'd think he'd know what he's doing in that sense, but you can also just see the argument that, yeah, there is an opening to be seen there when the arm swings down. So he did a video basically putting forth the argument about the positives of swinging the arm whilst throwing the kick. One of the big ones was just pointing out how many professional fighters, both in Muay Thai and the UFC, fighting in MMA, that swing their arm when throwing the kick. Now, go follow him, go check all of that stuff out, but I thought we'd just take a look at this question, maybe do a little bit of side-by-side comparison, just so we can put the whole thing to bed for once and for all. Now, for the sake of keeping this video simple, I'm going to keep it to the rear leg roundhouse kick. So we're not going to talk about kicking with the lead leg or throwing it off of a switch kick. Maybe we'll do those kicks on another video. Also, the only planned variable is going to be swinging that rear arm. So anything else you might see, like my lead arm dropping or a step in my foot or anything else, that's just unintentional habits, and you keyboard warriors can have fun down in the comment section below. Now, most of the people in Damien's comments talk about the defensive capabilities of throwing the kick like that. So the effect of dropping that arm and creating that opening. But what Damien argues is that the effectiveness of a kick comes down to more than just one element. So I would break it down into 5 key areas: the power, the speed, its defensive capabilities, the telegraphing associated with the technique, and your ability to combine it in with punches. Let's start with power. I think it will come as no surprise to most of you that when I swung the arm, I definitely felt like I was able to generate a lot more force. I think a huge part of this is when you do swing that arm down and away from your body, it allows you to put a lot more force through your hips. A lot of power in kicks, or the majority of power from kicks, does not actually come from the leg itself, but from your core, from your ability to rotate your hips through that kick. That's why they tell you that big butts equal big kicks. If you've got a big butt, big glutes that are all attached round into your hips and you've got a strong core, it's that's going to give you the ability to really turn over your hip and generate a lot of force and a lot of torque. When the guard was up, what I felt happened was it kind of narrowed me. And what that meant was I felt ever so slightly off balance. Now, I'm saying ever so slightly because it's a very subtle difference. I didn't feel off balance. So it's not an issue of, you just need to work on the technique. I just felt that there was a slight difference. I felt a little more confident in the ability to swing that kick with reckless abandon when I had that arm down and out. Similar to how you'd walk on a tightrope, right? You'd put your arms out to the sides and that helps to gauge you and give you a sense of balance. Whereas when everything is in and very narrow, talk to any striker and they'll tell you that you don't want too narrow a stance. If you've got a very narrow stance, that's going to affect your balance. So by having my arms kind of locked in and pinned to my body, I definitely felt like it had a very small effect. But that small effect had a compounding effect on my ability to turn my hips and generate force. All right, let's talk about speed. Now, I'll be honest with you, in terms of what it felt for me personally, I didn't feel there was a huge difference in the speed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine speed with telegraphing, and I'm going to explain to you why. I didn't feel there was a huge difference in the speed, as in from point A, my foot on the floor, to point B, my foot hitting the bag. Whether I swung my arm or not, I felt they were pretty much give or take exactly the same. However, when I tried to apply these principles in sparring, I felt like I was catching more people with the kick when I kept the arms up because I felt like it was telegraphing the technique less. There was less opportunities for my opponents to read me throwing the kick, and I found that I was sneaking it under the guard or over the top up to the head a little bit more often. A small side note on this for the channel, a lot of people ask me why I don't post sparring footage. It's not that I don't want you to see me sparring. I'm more than happy to share footage of me sparring, and I'd actually really like to, from the point of view of like take an experiment like this, I'd like to be able to show you how it applies in sparring. But I mostly spar with my own students, and I don't want to put them in a position where I need to ask them if they're comfortable being filmed and being put on the internet for everyone to see. At the moment, we're a pretty small, humble channel, but if anything did ever blow up or get big, I know certain people might feel uncomfortable with having that kind of exposure, and I don't want to put any of my students through that. I am in the process of trying to get a select group of guys together that have no issue with this so that we can start sharing some sparring footage on the channel. Keep an eye out for that if you're not already subscribed to the channel, and if you haven't hit the like button yet, go ahead and do that. Okay, defensive properties. Now, this was the reason that this video idea and this topic even came up, because like I said, people on Damien's channel were saying that when you swing that arm, you're creating this big opening on that side that's gonna leave you open to a counter. And in short, yes. When I threw the kick with my arm down, I was aware of and conscious that there definitely was a big opening available in terms of my physical defenses with my guard. Now, I'm someone who fights with a low guard most of the time. I've done a whole video on fighting with a low guard. So for me, not a big deal, as in I'm used to the idea of not having my guard pinned up to my chin. It's just not the style in which I fight. But I could see it, and I could see the difference. And depending on what martial art you're doing or the kind of opponent you were facing, you can certainly see where there is an opportunity for that to be taken advantage of. Now, the argument against this, the main argument that I would personally present is, if you're throwing this kick with enough force and with enough bad intention, it's very unlikely that your opponent's going to be able to ignore that. And by ignore that, I mean simply disregard the kick in order to try to hit you whilst you're throwing it. Because most people believe that the counter to someone throwing a roundhouse kick is to just come straight through the middle with the cross. Now, yes, if you can read it early enough that your cross beats the kick, great. But if you can't, and when you've got to also take into consideration is the increased range that the kick gives you, the kick allows you to stay further back, which might mean that you're out of punching range when you throw it. It's very difficult for someone to not have to physically defend it, either block it, move out the way of it, evade it, rather than simply being able to disregard it, step in, and hit you with an attack on that given opening. So yes, you're trading off some of the defensive properties of the kick by having to drop an arm, but it's to compensate and make up for the huge increase that you get, or the potentially huge increase that you get in the striking power. Now, I don't want it to sound like I'm advocating for swinging the arm over not swinging it. I'm going to come to that in the conclusion, but we'll give the advantage to having your hands up in terms of its defensive properties, but that's the argument for why you might think that if you swing the arm anyway, it's not going to be such a big issue. Okay, finally, I wanted to look at what it's like when you're combining it in with punches, because it's easy to look at these things in a vacuum and just go, well, when you throw that kick on its own, that's what you see, that's what you feel. But in reality, if you're just throwing kicks on their own, they're probably not landing anyway. If you're just throwing a naked kick out in the open, that's not hitting an opponent. It's important to set them up, and often the way people set up their kicks is they put them behind their punches. So I took a basic 1-2-3, a jab, cross, lead hook, and then did the combination both with the arm swing and without. And I have to say, for me personally, I much preferred it with the arm swing, but I think that might have something to do with the punch combination that I chose. You see, the 1-2-3 finishes on a lead arm hook, which means that you're already kind of counter-rotated to the way that you're going to rotate when you throw that kick. So it felt very natural to hook with my lead arm and then swing my back arm as I turned that hip back over the other way. Now, I'm saying this, but when I threw the 1-2-3, kept the guard up and threw the kick, it felt just fine too. But if I was gonna say I had a preference for what it felt like throwing the technique, I'd give the edge to the arm swing. But there's not a lot in it, if I'm being honest. All right, so what's the conclusion here? Because at the minute I feel like I'm kind of sitting on the fence, and that's not gonna really help you guys. I think a lot of it comes down to what you're using the kick for. Now, if you fight in Muay Thai or MMA, or really anything that's gonna be a very full contact orientated sport like that, I think the arm swing is worth the detriment that it gives you in its defensive properties. Because I think that focus on power and that ability to deliver it with kind of optimal balance and good comfort off of punches is well worth the risks you're going to take with not having that guard up in that position. I do think it means you have to really refine the kick and really work on it, so that the key is not that your arm is down, the key is how devastating that kick is, and no one's going to be able to get close to you in order to be able to defend it or counter it in the first place. However, if you train in things like karate or taekwondo or any of these sports that are a bit more speed orientated, and maybe the knockout isn't the key, it's not within the rule set of the game that you're playing, having that guard up is going to be a huge advantage. And the ability to be able to kick with that leg and be able to then instantly throw your hands and have them in the correct position is certainly going to be a plus to you. So really it just comes down to a game of styles. And I'm pretty sure when you look at this whole conversation that that's where the argument comes from. Probably the people who are looking at the arm swing and having a criticism of it are coming from more traditional martial arts where it's generally taught to kick whilst maintaining your guard. And that's mostly because if you look at the sparring styles, whether that be a point style sparring or a continuous style sparring that's not so focused or honed in around being kicked in the head, then I think that's where that kind of thing can shift and move from. It's also maybe just a bit of an old school approach. Like I said, when I went through all of these, with exception to the power, I didn't feel a huge significant difference either way. So if we're talking about the 1% that's going to make the difference, I'd give it to the arm swing for me personally. But if we're talking about how it fits within your style and how it fits within the mechanics of how you fight, I think it's very much subjective. My advice, go try them both. Try them on the bag, try them on the pad, and then of course, apply them in sparring and see which gives you greater success. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope it's been helpful. If it has done, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. We've got new videos every week, and I will see you on the next one.